I am delighted to introduce today's studio guest. It's Jane Dawson-Howe, who is the country manager for Ireland for Slalom, which is the business and technology consulting company. And previous to that, an illustrious career in the likes of Accenture and LinkedIn. But you'll tell us more about that, I'm sure. Jane, you're most welcome. And we always like to start these by looking a little bit at the human side. So I'd love to hear a little bit about yourself and your journey to your role here.
Okay, well, first of all, thanks very much, Anne, for having me. It's lovely to be here. Well, born and bred in Ireland, born in Dublin, grew up in Wicklow, so I've always lived in Ireland. It's always been my home, although I've lived and worked all over the world. I've one husband, the university professor, and I've two adult children who are great because they're both digital natives, so they give me an opportunity to see things through a different lens, I guess. What else would I say? As you mentioned, I spent a long time, 23 years, working for a global technology company, which was amazing, actually. Almost all of that time, I worked in the comms, media, and technology sector, which was always very technology forward. And so we were always, building interesting solutions, bringing together teams from all around the world. I think I learned a lot about myself. I developed a lot of versatility and resilience working in that industry. It never stayed still, but it was great. And then, as you say, I spent 6 years at LinkedIn, which was a real departure. Actually, they called me up to lead a European sales organization, which was completely outside my comfort zone and not something I'd ever done before. But the leader in the business was somebody I greatly admired. And so I jumped at the chance to do that. So I would say that my time at LinkedIn was very helpful to me in terms of the modern leadership skills I developed. So I was leading very diverse, very young teams who needed a lot of inspiration, a lot of communication. And also while I was there, we dealt with so many different things. We dealt with COVID, we dealt with remote work, we dealt with the return to the office. We had a lot of emotion and challenge around when Russia invaded Ukraine, because there were lots of personal stories around that. We rolled out a lot of transformation. We changed all the systems. We up-leveled how the salespeople worked. So I did a lot of really interesting, exciting things at LinkedIn. And then I got a phone call from Slalom.
And I suppose I'm going to come back a little bit on leadership, if you don't mind. But before I do that, tell us a bit about Slalom, for those who aren't aware of it, and maybe also then where the Irish operation fits into, because it's a big global organisation.
Yes, so Slalom is a modern business and technology consulting firm, and we work with our clients on their most ambitious projects, I would say. We take a very human-centred approach to our work, and we bring the newest of leading technologies and modern approaches to data and engineering and analytics and AI, and we say to help our clients create their future. Our motto is to dream bigger, move faster, and build better tomorrows for all. And we try to do this in a very collaborative and outcomes-focused way. And we have a great team of people who are highly skilled and love what they do. So that's what we do as an organisation. We're new in Ireland. We opened here earlier this year. We had an official launch in May of this year. But we're part of a global firm. We're the 8th international market for Slalom, after Canada, the UK, Germany, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand.
Wow.
There are about 12 or 13,000 of us around the world, but we're a key part of the international expansion story, and you're going to hear more about Slalom's international expansion, I'm sure, in the years ahead.
Fantastic. And like in all those roles you've just mentioned, including your current role, have you sort of developed thoughts around, what leadership should look like, or have you a description for your own leadership style, Shane?
That's a really good question, because I would say in the 30 years that I've been working, leadership has changed so much. I'm a big fan of something that we call organizational clarity. And a lot of people have heard of Simon Sinek, and he talks a lot about start with the why. And he has this diagram where he's got a circle, and in the middle of the circle is the why, and outside the why is the how, and then after that is the what. And organizational clarity is a bit like that. So you need to start with being really clear about what your organization is for, why it's here, and what it hopes to achieve. And then you need to be clear with every individual what their role is and how they're going to contribute to that. And then the next thing is, what are the systems? How do we operate as a business? And then lastly, what does everybody need to do to be successful? So that makes everything very clear. So organizational clarity requires lots of communication. So I like to say that I communicate early and I communicate often. And I learned that you should communicate even when you don't know the full story. You should say as much as you can, as early as you can. So what you're doing there is you're narrowing the gap where people don't know what's going on, and will fill that gap with their worries and their concerns, and can potentially get upset about things which aren't an issue at all. So organizational clarity, I think, is super important. I think I've changed a lot as a leader. I've mapped myself against all of these different frameworks over the years, and I've always been a person who gets stuff done. But over time, I think I've become a lot more empathetic. I think during COVID, we learned a lot of compassion. Just figuring out how do you work with people who are situated in really, really challenging circumstances. I like to think I'm inclusive. I'm a big fan of diversity and inclusion, and I was a sponsor of that within LinkedIn, and it's a big focus of mine now. And I bring clarity because that's one of my things. But if you were to ask my team, they would also tell you I'm very competitive. You should see me in a pub quiz. Like, there's nobody like me. I'm super competitive.
And that's probably quite a good thing in leadership, is it?
It is, as long as you don't take it too far. I mean, it's mostly a running joke, in work, because something will happen and somebody will say, oh yeah, because she's not competitive at all, but because yes, of course I am.
I love it. And tell me, I suppose, we have to have the obvious conversation, because it must impact hugely what you're doing. Is 2023 was such a big year for AI and for generative AI. So tell me a little bit about, for Slalom, the importance of AI in this past year and in the coming year, 2024.
Yeah, it's a great one. It's been a huge topic for us all year. I think 2023 was the year that the generative AI tools really hit the mainstream. And for us as a business just starting out, it was a very exciting time to be catching that wave. I think a lot of people have heard of the tools like AWS Code Whisperer and Microsoft GitHub Copilot, which deliver incredible productivity for developer teams. But now we've got all of these tools that you don't have to be an engineer to use. So like Microsoft's M365 Copilot and the OpenAI ChatGPT. And now there's a whole family of different Copilots being developed. Microsoft have lots of them. AWS are coming. Salesforce have them as well, that are going to drive incredible productivity and also quite a bit of creativity in people's day-to-day work. So that's very exciting. We are very proud to be one of the global launch partners with Microsoft for M365 Copilot. And that's brilliant because it appears in all of your Office tools. So it appears in Outlook, all of your Windows tools, in your Teams, everywhere else, and helps you do all sorts of things. So in the last few weeks, I've had it summarize meetings, list out the actions, start an email chain or review an email chain discussion and pull out the 3 or 4 salient points. I sent a PowerPoint to my team as a pre-read last week, and I had Copilot just summarize the key themes, the things that I wanted them to pay attention to. Now, it's not perfect, but perfecting something takes a lot less time than doing it from scratch. And so I think these tools are going to be incredibly disruptive, next year as businesses come to grips with them, how to implement them, how to build the business case around what they will do for productivity, but also think a lot about the data that's needed to train them efficiently, how to keep that safe and away from bad actors, but also to make sure it's balanced and doesn't introduce bias as well.
Yeah, it's one of the big issues, isn't it? And I love the fact that you mentioned not just, because so many people talk about productivity, but you mentioned creativity as well. If you could develop that a little bit, in what way do you think AI will?
So it produces pictures. So our sales guy is called Owen, and it's spelt the Irish way, EOGHAN. And a lot of our international colleagues can't get their heads around that at all. So his nickname is Onion. and he's designed himself an avatar, a sort of a guy which is an onion in sort of a suit of armor and stuff like that. So it creates a little bit of fun. I've used the tool to come up with icebreaker ideas or, team building ideas. You can ask ChatGPT to tell you jokes. There's lots of things out there, but it's used a lot now to produce content and pictures and marketing materials, and you can see that becoming a big area in the coming years.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. You can see it already, can't you, Jane?
Yeah.
My gosh. And tell me then, within the organisation itself, like you're helping people with innovation and digital transition and digital transformation, but what about within the organisation itself, your own digital transformation?
We did, because we got so excited about the potential of these generative AI tools. We kicked off an internal initiative earlier this year called Project 1K, and the objective was to present 1,000 generative AI demos or proofs of concept to 1,000 customers in 100 days. And there were a couple of reasons for this. One was to just explore the potential of the tools across all sorts of different industry sectors, but also to learn and co-create with our customers. And so that was really interesting and really insightful. And I think we did 1,300 in the 100 days. So we overachieved our objective, but it was because we learned so much as we went along. So you go into thinking about these tools assuming, I've a bit of an engineer's mindset, assuming that they work in a logical way. And then you realize that actually they work a little bit differently. And they're proofs of concepts. You don't maybe have all the data you need, and you mightn't have everything you need. But you start realizing what are the key bits that are important and that you can leverage. And so you learn a lot from building these, and you get faster and faster. And so we had 3-week proofs of concept, which we can now do in a week. So
wow,
very interesting.
That's amazing. And I mean, our partners on this series are IDA Ireland. So I do want to ask you as well of the kind of supports you've got from IDA in the kind of innovations that you're trying to carry out within your own organisation, or any other kind of help that you've got from IDA recently.
So the IDA are brilliant. I think the first thing to say is Slalom was talking to the IDA, I would say 7 or 8 years before we came here. They're brilliant at being in the right places around the world to have those conversations and being so available. And so when the conversation started with Slalom, they were about, well, what is the market opportunity? What is the cost of doing business? Where are you going to locate your team? Like, what's the office space situation? What are the tax implications? What about the talent? What about the competitive landscape? What's going on in the market? So I think the IDA have been incredibly helpful, not just to Slalom, but to so many companies in making a really informed decision about coming here. And now that we're here, there are lots of supports. You're plugged into a network of support. So recently we had a board meeting in Dublin, and before that we had breakfast with Donal Travers and Jennifer Lyons, and we covered a lot of things about where we were investing and the talent we need. And also, like, a hot topic for us right now is longer term office space, so they were able to provide some insight into that as well. So I think what the IDA has given us is access to a network of peer companies as well, information about things that are changing in the industry, and just knowing that they're there. You can always call them up and ask for a point of view on something. It's just good to know they're cheering for our success, really.
And your thoughts on Ireland's place in the world in this whole area?
Oh, well, people say that Ireland punches above its weight on the global stage, and I really think that it does. And I don't know what the secret sauce is, but there's definitely a lot of aspects there. But I think there are a few things that we have going for us. One is we do have a history. We've got a strong economy, and we have a history of innovation and creativity. We have lots of multinational organizations who are here, and I think they push us as a country to do better, to focus on our infrastructure, to focus on our housing, although that's a whole other conversation. But they push us to do the right things for the economy. I think that our geographic situation at that gateway between North America and Europe has been incredibly beneficial for all companies considering international or global expansion. And yeah, talent, we do have a great workforce here. We've got very well educated people, a great education system, and people are willing to come here to work, which is incredibly important. I think as well we've seen a trend maybe of some companies wishing to locate here now as the only English-speaking country in the EU at the moment. And of course our membership of the EU provides access to like a large, very large and prosperous market for goods and services. So there are lots of reasons why, Ireland does well, I think. And obviously, of course, the weather, that's why we all come here is for the weather. But despite the weather, we do.
It would be more despite, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would.
And it's funny, I think we're great communicators as well, which I think is very relevant to yourself.
I think that's true, and I think we're storytellers. Mm-hmm. And when you think about different things, social events, like some of the recent votes, 2015, the equal marriage and the abortion referendum and so on, it was stories, people's personal stories that were told. So I think we do have a little bit of a knack for that and for building relationships. And we're a small community. Everybody knows everybody. I'd be amazed if you and I didn't have 50 people in common that we just haven't discovered yet. So I think that really helps as well with trust and building relationships, and that's important for business as well as personal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in your role at Slalom, you would have your finger on the pulse quite a bit when it comes to all things technology, innovation. You have to have it. Mm-hmm. If you were to look forward for the rest of 2024, and maybe even beyond, are there trends that kind of stick out for you?
Yes, there are, but this is the time of year for forecasts for next year, and I was listening to an economics podcast, and they're like, okay, we do this year and we'll be completely wrong, but that is what we're expected to do. So yes, we've taken a look at trends, so I'm presenting them with some caveats, but there are definitely a few things to consider. There's one, I think, when you think about the year we've had, it's been very disruptive. We've had all of these generative AI tools, but there's been geopolitical conflict, there's been supply chain disruption. It's been a difficult year for doing business as a business person, but it's also been a difficult year as a consumer as well. So I think one trend we see is what we've called the impatient consumer. Like, who among us has not been frustrated at the end of the phone or a chat bot or something, waiting to be served, waiting to be told what we can, in a queue for our, electricity bill or to do something in banking and so on. And those experiences feel like they've got worse as companies have maybe cut costs and, and have not invested maybe in a good multi-channel experience. So, for example, I can do things in my banking app, but not all of them. And there are some things I have to go to the bank for, which means I have to walk, 15 minutes and have to be there before 2:30 and fill in forms and do things. And so it's not a great experience. So I do think that generative AI tools and well-enabled chatbots, which are operating over good quality, secure data, will be able to really improve that experience for consumers. And we've seen it. We've built many of those kinds of proofs of concept for our customers, and they work incredibly well when they're configured well over the data set. But good data underpinning those is super important. So that's one thing. Another, I think, is just time horizons have got much shorter. Everybody's looking for a much faster return on investment. When I started out 30 years ago in my career, it wasn't unusual to be part of a technology transformation program that took 3 years or more. Companies don't have the patience to wait for that now. Too much will change in 3 years for you to invest in something that might be obsolete in 3 years' time. So I think we're going to see an awful lot more fast sprints and speed to value from the programs that we work on, whether they're strategy programs or whether they're technology delivery programs. And there's going to be a lot more of a mindset of try something, move quickly, see if it works, fail fast, pick yourself up and go again. And we saw that a lot in the proofs of concept that we've been working on over the summer. So things that we started off with a particular approach because we had engineers' mindsets. By the end of 3 weeks, we were doing things in a completely different way because it's large language models and prompt engineering, and the expectations of the model are quite different. And so you get a very different result than you think. So I think that's the second one. And then the third has got to be around not losing sight of the people impact of all of this and the human touch. In every conversation I have with a customer or a potential customer or one of our technology partners, somebody around the table is going to say, well, the technology, that's not the problem, and it's not that the people are a problem, but it's the people need to be considered in all of this. People's jobs are going to change. The way people work is going to change quite dramatically, I would say, in the next couple of years with these co-pilots, with these assistants, which are going to take a lot of the analysis, the repetition out of the work, and that's going to give us time to do other things. So a lot of things are going to change. So that, I'd say, would be the third one. But who knows? Ask me again in 12 months' time, it'll be something completely different that we haven't even imagined yet.
We won't hold you to it, I promise, Jane. But it's lovely to get your point of view of what we might see. And I wouldn't disagree with any of the three, I have to say. So look, it has been absolutely fantastic to chat to you today. So thanks so much for coming into the studio. Jane Dawson-Howe, thanks a minute.
Thank you very much for having me.